then I'd like to call this meeting of the Governance Committee of the JMU Board of Visitors to order, and then immediately yield for a report regarding our SWOT analysis.
Thank you, Jack. And I can really briefly just mention, so you all received these two documents, and we can share them on the screen. Would that be helpful for anyone to have that on the screen, or do people have that available?
I think we have them, but
yeah.
Whatever.
Okay. So I want to thank Chris Oram and his team. We had over 200 faculty, staff, students, alumni who've contributed to this, and as we look at making this SWOT analysis wider, and as you see, there are over 1,700 individual statements that are feeding into this in terms of how we're going to approach it. So I just wanted to start by thanking Chris for his hard work, which included visiting with some of these groups over the weekends, and so he's been doing a great job, and I will hand it over to him to lead where we are and where we're going.
Thanks, David, and good afternoon, everyone. As David mentioned, what you have is two documents, just to break it up a little bit. One is a document that lists all of the elements, the different strengths, SWOT elements that have been generated as a result of the meetings that I've been a part of, the survey responses that have come in to date. Our university planning team has had a chance to review and revise and refine the statements as you see them. And that, again, is a group of about 30 individuals from across all divisions of the institution, including at least one student, our SGA president, serves on that committee. And then division heads have also had a chance to weigh in and provide their input. So what you see here is essentially a crafted set of statements that have been have had input from across the university, and the one group that hasn't had input into them before this broader survey goes out is the board and particularly you all as the governance committee. So I believe one of the things that you all wanted to do was be able to reflect and to be able to add your thoughts and to notes to this list. And then the second document just had an overview of how the survey is laid out. That survey, we're going to refine the final date on when we'll actually send that out. But thought we could walk through that, or you all can provide any comments you have about the questions that will be asked in addition to the SWOT analysis, most of which are just basic. What do you do at JMU? How are you connected to the university? How are you engaged with the university? As well as a few questions at the end, just to be able to look a little bit deeper at the responses as they come out. So I welcome any comments or feedback at this time, and look forward to the conversation.
So, Chris, may I ask a process question? Are you at the point, given the vast amount of work that you've already done here, are you at the point where if we said, gee, we think this strength would be clearer if it was expressed this way or that way, are you at the point where you can take that input, that we can actually modify some of these, or are we past that point?
No, absolutely. I think it's still up for clarification and any way to refine the statements.
So, Jack, is it okay if I jump in here? I don't know what your process. Okay.
Please do.
So for me, the thing that we want out of this SWOT analysis is sort of clear feedback about what people think is a strength and what people think is a weakness. And so my comments are really around trying to separate out and therefore clarify some statements that I think have too many ideas in one sentence. That's really the point of my comment. So for example, the very first strength, we describe, it says a high quality education that prepares students for becoming educated and enlightened citizens who succeed professionally. There's a lot of ideas in there. And so I'm not sure we're going to understand quite what we're getting back. My suggestion would be that we separate. I think we have many questions that sort of get at high quality education, but to me, what we're really after is, do people feel that we prepare students for educated and enlightened citizenship? And do we prepare them to succeed professionally? So I think those are two distinct ideas, and I think they're both important. In a similar vein, in Strength 4, it says our brand growth and evolution as a national research institution positions the university well for the future. Talk to me a little bit about, are we focused on, what are we trying to ask there? Are we, that's a lot, the brand, the growth, the evolution. What are we, what's our real issue there?
And these are great points. I just want to mention, part of the challenge here, right, is to not have 20 different strengths. So I think as someone who's written a lot of surveys, you know, double-barreled and triple-barreled items are always challenging. So I appreciate you bringing this up first off, just because I know that some of these items make that a bit of a challenge. So that one in particular, I think the focus on that one is the brand. That came up a lot in the conversations that I've had in the survey results. It's about the reputation and the brand.
Okay.
So that I think is I think all of those pieces kind of play into that, just, you know, how we've been growing our number of applications. So it really kind of speaks to that. But I think maybe the evolution and if I were to kind of tease that one apart, the evolution and the growth kind of are maybe help to feed into that, or the reputation is helping to drive that to some degree.
Reputation is actually a great word. I think it's clear. It sort of encompasses all that. Okay, thank you. That's helpful. And I'm not trying to dominate the conversation here, so I can yield and
Well, wait though, Carly, let's drill down on that though. On that one in particular, can we get language that is more well suited? Like, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, we might say something like JMU's status as a national research institution positions the university well for the future. I know we're quibbling over words here, but on the other hand, that's what people are responding to. I'm not sure that we have a brand yet that says we're a national research institution. We are one, but I don't know how well known that is. So I think what this one is probably after is, we're a national research institution and that positions us for growth. We can decide what we need to do to bolster that reputation. But perhaps I'm misinterpreting it.
I would say, based on the conversations, that it's almost, I mean, I think the National Research Institution plays into that, but I would say that everything that has happened for the university over the last few years, especially the athletics, the national research, I think it all plays into that. So I might recommend, based on the kind of the feedback, maybe it's JMU's reputation positions the university well for the future, or JMU's growing reputation, something along those lines, and encompass all those things. If you're looking to maybe make it a little simpler of a statement.
Yeah,
that might be,
or growing national reputation. Of course, academics are very excited about national research. The athletic department is very excited about athletics, but the truth is we have a growing national reputation, and that is a strength.
Is the rest of the committee okay with making the change that JMU's growing national reputation positions the university well for the future?
Yes.
I think it's a point well taken.
Carly, you're on a roll.
Well, I didn't have really any other specific comments on the strengths aspect. I thought the rest of them were pretty clear and pointed. So, you know, before I just keep going, maybe others have something they want to say about strengths.
Carly, I don't. I thought they were great. Having you point out the fact that some of them were double and triple barreled, it's a point well taken, and I think it's much clearer now.
So then if I can go on to the weaknesses, I was a little these seem to me to be weaknesses of various kinds. So, for example, I don't quite know what to do with weakness 5. If I were taking a survey, I wouldn't know how to answer this. People experience JMU unevenly.
Carly, I had the same question. I was like, what in the world does that mean?
I think we all did.
This
Could
one
you
came out of
explain-
yeah, I'm sorry.
No, I was just saying, could you explain that one a little?
Sure. It stems from both some of the findings, particularly I'm thinking of the Valor Advisory Group mentioned how, in particular, adult students, for instance, this is just an example from the surveys. There's other data that has been gathered over the last several years from the National Student Survey or the National Survey for Student Engagement and the climate study that was done a few years ago. But the Valor Advisory Board also spoke to this when I met with that particular group. That just speaks that there are certain bodies of students in their case, whether it was veterans or just adult students in general, that have a harder time fitting in. The JMU, the way that certain things are structured, whether it's joining student organizations or things of that matter, make it difficult for certain groups to really feel like they fit in. And that type of a finding has been echoed in some of the other surveys that we've done over the past several years. So I think this was a statement that the group, when the university planning team kind of grappled with this a little bit, but this was the statement that at least resonated with them in terms of the notion that there are maybe certain students or certain student groups that have a harder time fitting in or feeling welcomed or part of the campus community. And we were struggling a little bit with how to maybe share that. And this was what we settled on.
Is it accurate based on that comment to say that adult or non-traditional students may have difficulty taking advantage of JMU? I mean, is that what we're trying to say? I just don't.
I would say it goes a bit broader than that. Again, the Valor spoke to it kind of specifically within their group, but the surveys would also lend to. I know that the oftentimes things of students of different races or ethnicities tend to yield the same findings. So I would say it's probably a little bit broader than just the adult learners.
Okay.
See, the challenge that I too picked up on this because of other things going on in higher ed. And Chris, this could be Black students, white students. It could be LGBTQ students and whatever the word for, it could be male and female students. It could be urban and rural students. So when we say it could be faculty and students because it says people, right? And so the way that it's worded, it doesn't clarify what people have the uneven experience, which is why Carly was trying to say, okay, if it's Valor, then let's say that. But, something that would be more precise, and I'm not recommending it, I'm just throwing it out there to get to precision. Students of different backgrounds have a disparate experience at JMU. Not recommending that, but at least then we know we're talking about students and we're talking about them having different backgrounds. That's still ambiguous because it's not clear on what type of different background, but people experience JMU unevenly. It could be somebody driving down the freeway who sees it, and if they're driving in a truck, it's different from if they're driving in a sedan.
Are we, Jack, to build on that, is what we're actually after here that the student experience is inconsistent? Or is not always consistent, or is not always up to our highest quality standards?
And are we just, Chris, I know this is a bunch of questions, and are we just talking about students?
I would say based on the data that I mean, I think when you look at and I'm trying to remember the specific findings, but I think it is students and it probably is faculty and staff as well, depending on a group. I think most of the findings from the conversations were geared about students in this case. But I think if I think back to some of the climate study results and whatnot, I think it was similar among certain groups of faculty and staff. I think that the language, Jack, that you presented summarizes, I think, what the key element is that folks from different backgrounds, whether it's students or faculty staff, have different experiences and may experience JMU differently. The notion of unevenly may be a little bit hard to kind of grapple with, but I think the notion is that depending on your background, you may have a harder time feeling valued by the community or fitting in or finding your place within the community. And I think that was the kind of essence that we were trying to put into the survey, because we asked some other questions, we can then go a bit deeper to then look to see, is this mostly faculty who agree with this? Is this mostly students? So we can go a little bit, if we have something that captures the essence of what we're trying to do and maybe captures a little bit better, we can then be able to dive into the results a little bit and see where those pockets are and who most agrees and whatnot. So that I think, if that helps to kind of provide the context a little bit more.
Just to play devil's advocate here a little bit, who owns the problem? Is this because students don't take advantage of the opportunities that exist? Or is it because the university doesn't provide those opportunities? As an example, I can and have talked to two minority students who have very different perspectives of JMU. And one of them thinks it's the best place ever and the most welcoming and lots of opportunities. And another doesn't feel that way. So I'm not, as we look at that, I'm not sure how much of the problem the institution actually owns. And I don't know how to get at that. And maybe as you drill down a little bit, you can figure that out.
I think it's an excellent point. And I think that, we might look at a number of them where we don't quite know how to solve the issue, right? Or who, as you said, who owns it. And I think this should, and I hope, is seen as a starting point for understanding a little bit more about where we all are as an institution. There are certainly statements on here that may not be able to be addressed by a strategic plan or by the institution themselves. It serves as a starting point to understand at least what some of the sentiment and perception is across campus, and allows us to maybe dig in a little bit more after the report is done and after we kind of see it. But I very much take that point in consideration. You're very right.
Would it clarify if it said something like people experience belonging at JMU unevenly? Is it getting at, or is that still not totally clear?
How about differently? Unevenly is a word that I just think you can interpret 4 million different ways. I had the problem with unevenly.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with that. And on belonging, can we please not, there are certain words that are lightning rods, and can we avoid them here?
Is there a word that's exactly why I asked. And I think, is there a word that cuts through that still gets at what's behind that, being part of the community? Or
Is
How
differently,
about-
does
how about-
differently work? No.
Yes, but people experience opportunities at JMU differently. That's one rendition.
Chris, one of the questions may be however we word this question, and I certainly like Jack's wording. I think what we're really asking you is, because you said there's a lot of data behind this, you need to feel comfortable that you are going to get data back that's actionable.
Right.
And if you think you will with this wording or Jack's wording or someone else's, great. But if we just get kind of um, general discontent that we can't do much with, then we've wasted a question.
But Chris, are you saying, and this truly is a question, are you saying that from the responses that you get to this question, you're going to cross tab it with who it comes from in order to be able to evaluate who is claiming the that there are different experiences?
That would certainly be one way that we could look at this, and one of the ways in which this finding has kind of surfaced in other surveys is not necessarily the overall results, but then when we dive in a little bit in terms of who strongly agrees with this statement versus who maybe doesn't, we might find that students of certain backgrounds or faculty staff of certain backgrounds. Now we'd be limited in terms of the amount of information given the questions we're asking. We're not asking a ton of different demographics, but in terms of their affiliation with the institution or not, it would allow us to at least look a little bit more. And again, the survey is a starting point. If it surfaces as something that we want to explore more, that's where we can look into focus groups. We can do other work to try to understand the problem on a deeper level based on the results. So in a lot of ways, the SWOT kind of serves as a starting point to then be able to kind of steer the university or look for the direction that we need to go into the future to address this, or just to recognize that we can't necessarily address. I'm trying to think of the language, people experience JMU differently. And yeah.
I don't know that differently is the right word, because depending on your major, depending on what organizations you're in, everybody does have a different experience based off of not everybody's taking the same courses, not everybody has the same interests. I'm not sure differently is the right one. Again, in this section particularly, I feel like some of them are leading questions that doesn't necessarily get us the answers we want or need. I think it's more of a, everybody at JMU has a welcoming, or people at JMU have a positive experience, or I think that's the tone here, because, I think if we ask it this way, some people are going to say, well, yeah, I just don't know that unevenly or different is the best way. I think it'd much be more effective to say something along the lines of, the weakness is, not everybody, or, students don't have the same favorable experience or same positive experience as the majority of students, something like that. That kind of gives us the, is there a larger number of people who are saying, no, I agree that there is a lot of people who don't have the same positive experience. Because, Kay, to your point, you have one that has a positive experience, one has a negative experience. They both have very different experiences, but what's to say one's not, they're different.
Right.
Can we engage in all the opportunities of the university affords? I don't know, because it's more of a personal case example. One person may be outgoing and one person may not, and choose to engage in opportunities, and some don't engage at all.
So again, we probably aren't going to wordsmith it to an appropriate conclusion, but I think, Chris, you're hearing feedback from us that we're concerned you're not going to get data that's actionable or meaningful from this question.
Right.
And so I think you need to take that away and think about, can you in fact get actionable and meaningful data based on your ability to cross tab, as Jack suggests, or not, and clean it up if the answer is or not.
And words to avoid are belonging, culture, and words to gravitate toward are opportunity and engagement. Okay, so opportunity, stay away from equity or anything like that. Unevenly is the uh, the opposite of equity. So let's stay away from that. And then you get the rest of the feedback. But I think Carly is right. You get all the components of the sausage and then go make some sausage.
May I ask, though, Jack, you provided some wording earlier that you said don't necessarily take this, but I think it actually does make a statement as a weakness that people can either agree or disagree to, which is kind of what we're looking at. And that was that students of different backgrounds experience JMU differently or have disparate experiences at JMU. So students of different backgrounds have disparate experiences at JMU. That kind of gets at the heart of what the issue is that has surfaced through the other surveys and through the conversations. Is that phrasing one to stay away from, or is it one that might actually, because I could see how we could use that, right? Because if students of certain backgrounds strongly agree with that statement versus students of other backgrounds strongly disagree with that statement, that would tell us a little bit about what groups feel like there are disparate experiences and may experience that. But I would ask for feedback or guidance on that wording.
So in my experience, that is safe language under SFFA because it's looking at background. It's not looking at attributes, it's looking at experiences and background. So yes, students of different backgrounds, because that would pull in what you were telling Carly about the veteran students. They've got a military background. It would also pull in the rural urban. But it also pulls in the things that are less safe in a more innocuous way.
Okay, can we
Move on? Yes.
Can we move on? Okay. So let me again, my concern with some of these weaknesses is they are leading questions that everyone can agree to, and therefore we may not get meaningful data. So for example, compensation remains a concern to faculty and staff despite recent efforts. In my experience, compensation is always a concern. So is the issue we're after here that we don't believe compensation is yet competitive? Is the issue I get it. We get compensation concerns in every survey because that's how human beings are in every organization. Someone's going to say compensation isn't as good as it should be. But what do we want to do with this?
Carl, I had the same question. I was wondering if it's one of those, compensation remains below the national average, or something along those lines. Because to your point, everybody's gonna say, "Yeah, I should be paid more," but it's more of a where do we rank in order to maintain the quality of staff that we have. I think is the key for that question.
I would say that as a because this document is supposed to represent the common themes that emerged.
Yeah,
compensation was a common theme. To the point about the data of where we stand, I don't know right off the top of my head where, and I think it depends on, are you talking about faculty? Are you talking about staff? Are you talking about different groups? Again, I think this provides the opportunity to say, listen, 90% of people who respond to this survey agreed that compensation remains an issue. Let's work with the Compensation Advisory Council. Let's set some targets and some benchmarks and dive deeper into the survey to see where we stand. Maybe, and I'm not saying this is the case, maybe compensation isn't the issue, but we are not doing a good enough job of communicating out where we actually stand relative to other groups. The findings from the survey will allow us to dive deeper. This is just the starting point for how we can then use information to educate, to communicate, to validate some of these findings. And I think that's where I would say it's a concern. It's perceived as a weakness. We then need to do a better job of determining the extent to which it actually is a weakness, or need to be able to communicate how we actually stand relative to others.
That's helpful commentary to me, at least. I don't want to speak for others, but
I just feel the way it's worded, it's going to be every single person that's a faculty or staff member is going to say it's an issue and doesn't adequately say whether or not it's truly a weakness.
Yeah, in other words, I think what Dave is saying, which I completely agree with, is we may get 100% agreement on this, and unless and until we have benchmark data that we can look at and say, yep, it's an issue, or nope, it's really not an issue, we don't know how to act on this.
And this is something that I've grappled with a little bit and have shared with others too, is I think the challenge that we have with this, with any sort of SWOT survey, is if you don't include it and people look and say, well, this is the list of things that was come up and identified by all these leadership groups, and compensation isn't on there. The concern I would have is that it might send a message that we're not picking up on the biggest concerns that people have voiced, even if we plan to address it. And so that's a challenge I have with the SWOT survey in general. I completely agree. A lot of people are going to agree with that statement, and probably some others. If you don't include it but still plan to address it, how do we communicate? You know, the challenge is, how do we communicate that we've heard that this is an issue when we plan to address it, even if we don't put it on the survey itself and list it as a common element.
The way I sort of read that question is that the weakness is that compensation remains a concern, not necessarily that compensation is a problem. And compensation remains a concern to faculty, and we can drill down and find out if in fact that is true or not. But it comes as no surprise that it is a concern.
I think that's well said. Thank you. That clarifies it for me anyway. Again, I don't want to hog the ball here, so.
By all means, go right ahead.
So, sort of the same comment on the next one. There are perceived inequities in workload expectations. I just need to understand, let's just say 100% of the people respond to that. What would be our next steps? This obviously came up a lot. It's your second one.
I think if this was something that was agreed upon, I mean, I can't speak to necessarily how senior leadership would want to. David, I feel like you just came off mute, so maybe you want to speak to this one. But yeah, I think knowing that something is a perception, is at least perceived as a weakness, gives us the opportunity to dive in and explore it more beyond just the surveys and the interviews that I conducted with these leadership groups. It really would, I think for any of these, right? I think it's true of any of these. A lot of these are perception because they were gathered by survey results and folks who know, but not necessarily providing and feeding specific data points to say it's based on their own experiences. So anything that has high agreement, or that that rises to the surface of, yes, people agree this is a weakness or strength, whatever it is, gives us the opportunity again to kind of set our sights on it, to understand it better moving forward, address it within a strategic plan, put together some folks that can look at it more and continue on that way. I would say would be the case for that one, or for any of them that are perception.
I see it almost as a two-step process. One, determining if they perceive it to be true, and my guess is they do. And then second, benchmarking it to determine if it is true or not. And then finally, if it's not true, that tells us the real problem is communication. And maybe perhaps we need to do a better job of communicating to faculty what the benchmarks are, what the reality is. So if they perceive it to be a huge problem, but in fact it isn't, maybe they don't have enough data to determine that.
This one's going to be helpful too, that we're going to have division. So if we have something that's true in one division, it might be helpful for us in division heads to think about workload in one of those areas. And then faculty, I'm thinking especially in terms of rank. So you're a part-time professor, and lots of our adjunct professors are concerned about workload. We can do much more of a granular study. And then faculty in general, if we did a workload study recently, but if that remains a concern, than looking at numbers of majors and advising workloads, all of those things. So I think it's going to be especially helpful in this case where it's coming from, and depending on that, looking at it more deeply as a leadership team, just as one example.
I think part of the I'll just speak for myself. I think part of my struggling a little bit with some of these questions is because in my experience, let me call it a more traditional SWOT analysis is really focused on competitive positioning. So in this case, one university to another, JMU versus someone else. And I think this isn't a criticism. I'm just trying to state what I understand. I think what we've done here is combine, for very good reasons, I'm sure. But I think what we've done is combine a more traditional employee survey, which really gives management and leadership things to work on to improve performance and effectiveness, with a more traditional competitive assessment of an entity in a competitive space relative to others. And so I think that's where I struggle with some of these questions. But in fact, the more I listen, the more I think what we're doing here, and it's legitimate, is if we need to understand the answers to these questions from a personnel point of view so that management can work on them, then we ought to ask them.
Yeah, that's fair.
What else you got, Carly?
Well, at the risk of beating a dead horse here, again, while improving, there's a perceived lack of transparency among senior leaders. That to me is an employee survey question. We need to know that. That is certainly something that leadership and management will have to work on if that comes back extremely high. I'm not sure it tells us much about our relative weakness in competitive positioning compared to UVA or Virginia Tech or someone else. And that's okay, because we're getting a lot of different but related information through this survey, I think.
I also wonder if there's opportunity as we get more, with as a new president comes in, as this is just, again, the very start of really crafting what a new strategic plan might look like. This is kind of step one. I hear what you're saying, and I think that there may be opportunity to do maybe additional work to look at that competitive advantage as a separate process, and maybe combining it with what we see here as we move through a process over the next year to year and a half, to be able to get at what you're talking about, which is what is our competitive advantage relative to others, and how do we maybe combine what we find here with additional information we have to go out and find to get at some of those points. I think it's great feedback, and it helps me kind of think about what are the gaps we're still missing to be able to really come up with a strong vision moving forward. So I appreciate the feedback.
Yeah, sorry, Kay, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, in a traditional SWOT analysis, you would not have this much internal data being sought.
That's right.
And I think that's helpful to know. But if what we're really after is our competitive advantage, then many of these questions are not getting to that. It is so internal that I'm not sure if we're really trying to answer the question about our competitive advantage that we're going to learn that much. It's telling us a lot about what we have to do, and that certainly is a part of it. You can't compete if there are so many fractures internally. But this isn't a traditional SWOT analysis. It's more, and I think you called it, Carly, it's more of a employee engagement type survey, which is helpful and good information, and you want to know it.
Well, it's good. I think that's well said, Kay.
But what is our weakness as compared to our competitors?
Yeah.
Is how I was looking at it. What are our opportunities as compared to our competitors?
Yeah, so if we just move to opportunities for a second, and look, Chris, you should be, I mean, you have, the reason I asked my original question about how much opportunity is there is realistic. This is a process that's been out there a long time. You've been socializing this a long time. People have invested a lot in responding. I mean, we can't throw it out and start over, but we just need to understand what we're getting and understand how much of it is useful to a new president as he tackles a management challenge, and how much is useful to a board of visitors as they tackle a competitive challenge. With regard to the competitive challenge, I look at, say, the first one, opportunity one. JMU can expand relationships and collaborations within the university to advance its mission. Okay. I do think that a competitive assessment, an objective competitive assessment, would say that JMU has not done enough to advance its relationship with its alumni or its outside partners, and that represents an opportunity for us. You know, we have this whole pool of partners and alumni that we've never really aggressively tapped. So to me, those are two different thoughts, one facing internal, one facing external.
You know, given that this was the elements that are identified, and obviously they want to be, we're trying to, next step is to share them more broadly. I'm listening to what you all are saying and wonder if there's a way to maybe, again, the challenge is we ask people for additional, you know, they can provide additional feedback on it. Now, again, this is going broadly. This is going to alumni. This is intended to go, you know, community members, folks of that nature. But I wonder if maybe we reshape some of the open-ended questions to get at some of this, is to say, what is the competitive advantage? I mean, what, you know, just thinking maybe we use the survey as an opportunity to get some of that information, that open-ended feedback, which would take some time to bring in, but might be able to allow us to get some of that data that I can then share in June about what some of these, what alumni are saying, what community are saying about that competitive advantage.
And Chris, I was just going to say, I wonder if some of this can also just be beefed up. You know, we had a question about compensation. Can we say, if we're hearing we need more about competitors, you know, in comparison to our peer institutions, compensation is X, Y, or Z. Are there things that we can adjust some of the language to tighten up? We're trying to, and some of them will probably not be able to be that way. But if we're not sure on a question about where we're targeting, can we lean on the side of, in comparison to competitors, in comparison to our closest peers?
I would almost argue we could find that data on our own and use that to support whatever the results are.
For compensation, but
yeah, for that one
that we can get at.
So let me give you an example of this dichotomy to me. So in the, let me take it from the point of view of employee survey. We have obviously a large set of employees and staff and faculty and maybe students who believe that JMU can use AI responsibly and take advantage of emerging technologies. So people are feeling good. And I know JMU has engaged for quite a long time in understanding AI, and that's been socialized, and there's been a lot of work done. So you have a set of people who are saying, yeah, that can be an advantage. And then you have a set of people who are saying the rise of artificial intelligence will disrupt our approach to teaching and learning. Okay, so I'm not surprised that you see people who care about JMU taking both sides of that argument. It's a threat, it's an opportunity. From a competitive positioning point of view, what I would want to know, I think, is where do we stand right now as a university relative to our understanding of AI, our current use of AI? Are we further ahead than others, or are we way behind others? And therefore, strategically, what should we do about that? And so I think what we're getting in this is how people feel about it, but I'm not sure it gives us the information we need to say, this is an advantage to us. We need to put the pedal to the metal on AI, or whether in fact, wow, we're way behind and we need to get into remedial training pretty soon because AI is coming whether we like it or not. Is that helpful, or am I just blabbing here?
No, I mean, that's very helpful. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And then honestly, I promise it's my last point. But again, to me, it's about context and what we're going to get. There are clearly, based on this, there are clearly people, a lot of people perhaps inside JMU, who are concerned that changes to the athletics landscape negatively affects our ability to have consistent success. To me, we have an athletic director who's actually fairly confident that changes in the environment are to our advantage, that we're well prepared to deal with that. And that also, to me, is a leadership decision to say, are we going to do the things necessary to take advantage of this changing environment? Or do we believe that there's nothing we can do and we're going to be negatively impacted? So that might give us data about how people feel about it, but it doesn't dictate our choice. It doesn't dictate our strategic choice. I don't think if, 100% of the people say it's going to negatively impact us, that we should necessarily decide strategically that we are disadvantaged. We might ask the question instead in a June retreat, what does it take for us to be strategically advantaged, despite how people feel internally?
Right.
I feel I have overly dominated the conversation, so I'm going to stop.
Well, no, your comments have been extraordinarily helpful because they've been a kind of a roadmap for the conversation. But if that's all you've got, did anybody else see anything that jumped out in any of the sections, Dave?
The one thing I had, it was in the first, I guess one, if it's first attachment, which is kind of what I would call the demographic section, like for example on Q1.
Yeah.
And it's, it says, select all the ways you're connected to JMU. The one I think would be helpful to include there is donor, because I do think it would be a good crosstab to figure out, are you an alumnus who donate, or are you an alumnus who doesn't donate? Because I do think that's a differentiation of some people's engagement.
Can I ask a question on that in particular? If someone chooses alumnus or many of these, I think outside of even they will get to a question about all the ways that they've engaged over the last year. Because I remember you said this in the February committee meeting, and there's a lot of skip logic in the document I sent you, so they won't see all these questions, but for those who are able on, it's question 1.9. It's on page 8 in the document, and it lists. So if someone says I'm an alumnus, they're going to get a chance to say how have I engaged with the university over the last year, and it's anything from visiting a campus to attending a performance or speaker. But making a financial donation to the university is one of those options. I guess my question is, do you feel? I can certainly add donor as a separate option, but that would kind of be encompassing of an alum would also be a donor, would also be so I added it there as a way and got feedback on that from division heads of all the ways that maybe someone has engaged, so that we could look at those those different things, but I'm curious if that might
Yeah,
satisfy.
my view of it was just more kind of on the potential crosstab side of this.
Okay.
Like if you're, if you pull, there may be a different perspective of, somebody who, look, just, who is an employee who also donates versus an employee who doesn't, or, a community member who also donates versus a community member who doesn't. I think that's a way for us to look at how their responses are indicative of, look, if they're a community leader who doesn't give, they may have a very different perception of JMU than a community member who does give to JMU. I'm just thinking through it more on the crosstab side of the analysis.
And we'll be able to do that with that, as long as they check that whatever their status is or their affiliation, as long as they check that they also made a donation to the university in the last year, that allows us to be able to look at that if that suffices.
Right. What I'm saying is, but not everybody's going to get Q 1.9, right?
Unless they're a current student. I don't have a current employee doing that, because a current employee would be engaging in a lot of those things. So if you're interested in how a current employee who donates differs from a employee like a current employee who doesn't donate, I can still bring them to that question. But those are the only two groups right now who don't get that question, are current students and current employees. Everyone else will be driven to that question to ask them how are they engaging with the university.
Yeah, I just think that, I mean, that may work. I just, the one thing that we've heard over and over again is, one of our greatest weaknesses and threats is our lack of engagement from alumni, in other words, and it's hardly even mentioned or touched in this entire analysis. Even on the threats, we don't dive into the donation side of it in great detail, I thought. So I just think it's something, at the end of the day, it's going to be something that we're going to have to spend a lot of time with once we get this back. I just don't know that we're diving into it enough with the survey. And at the same time, look, you may also say, look, the people who aren't giving aren't going to fill out the survey to begin with. So, so we'll just kind of go from there.
Yeah, by the way, Dave, I completely agree with you from a classic competitive positioning SWOT point of view. We're going to have to dive into fundraising and donations and alumni and all that, and for sure. But at least we're going to get some data here. Chris, what I hear you saying is we will know of the alumni who answered this, we're going to know how many of them are donating who responded to the survey and how many don't, and whether there's a difference in their attitude.
Right. I will say I actually the kind of the last set of it's been changed because it's been seen by others, but the elements that you're seeing here, probably a more condensed set of them were shown to the Alumni Association Board of Directors just last weekend. They were kind of the last group to see it. Of that group, there was over, I mean, I'm not speaking for them, but the sense I got and what they validated was that the things that they saw resonated with them as engaged alumni in terms of all of the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats that they saw. So of those groups, and they were asking, how can we get more, how can we make sure that the survey gets out there and is seen by others? But at least from that particular group of individuals, I'm sure many of whom, if not all, are donors, there was widespread kind of agreement with what they saw in the survey in terms of the findings from an alumni perspective.
And I guess the last question I had, and it may not give us a whole lot of, I don't know how much data it would actually give us for what it would involve, but on was, I guess, Q9 or Q1.9, does it make a difference as to what they give to at the university? Is there a difference in saying, if they click the box that they donate to the university, is it worth a follow-up question to find out, are they an athletic donor? Are they a donor to the College of Business? Are they, what type of donor engagement, where do they give to the university And does that impact their perception of some of these questions? You know, if they're giving to the Duke Club, do they have, you know, do they rate different priorities from academics lower than they do? I'm just trying to think of, as we, you know, as we continue our conversations about donor engagement with the university, having maybe a better understanding of what their perception of the university is based off of where their giving has been. I don't like I said, and that may be too complicated to put in there and list, you know, the 500 different areas that people can give to. I'm just trying to think through, does an academic donor view the university differently than a Duke Club donor?
I mean, it would not be challenging if, maybe not provide all the different buckets, but if it was more of a broad-based, if you click that button, you're just a simple follow-up question that says, generally, where do you tend to, you know, to make your donation? It's not asking how much, it's not asking for specifics. Because this is the beginning of the survey, I'm aware and conscious of not wanting to make folks feel like
Right.
this is a request for money. They're going to be asked for a donation, or that somehow they're going to be. But I hear your point, and I'm wondering if I could do a simple follow-up to that question that just asks, you know, do you typically give money to athletics, academics? I can maybe touch base with Nick and see if he's got other maybe buckets that would make sense for that without going too deep and too detailed, so that we could have a sense of that and be able to look a little bit at how perceptions differ across those who tend to donate or support different large-based causes.
So Chris, how are we sending this to alumni? I mean, what list of alumni are you sending it to? They're obviously engaged, or you wouldn't have contact with them.
It will go, I mean, one, it's going to be, anyone could go to the site and look at it, although if you're not necessarily that engaged,
If you're not
you may not go
engaged,
to the
you
site.
won't know to go.
But anyone who's got their contact information in the system, so that's, I mean, however many alums have information, are going to be sent communication about taking the survey. So you know, I don't know what the total number, but I think it's over 100,000 of our alumni. There's contact information. Now, how many of them choose to read anything they get from JMU versus how many of them, that's going to be up to them, but it will go out to all alumni for whom we have contact information. That is the intent.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing as we are coming up on our allotted time, are there any additional burning questions for Chris?
Not a question, just a comment. I think it is wise to be thoughtful about how you position this survey, what you say about this survey when you send it out to 100,000 plus people, because it will become a public document. There's no way it will be kept confidential with that broad a distribution. And so I just would ask you all to think, and ask Charlie as well, to think about, this shows up on the, you know, first screen of some paper. What do you want it to say? Because it will show up. There's, you know, there's too much going on around JMU right now. There's a new president coming. There's, you know, all of the Dear Colleague letters. There's all of this stuff going on around academia, and then there's stuff going on around JMU. And so when something like this goes out to 100,000 plus people, it will become public. People will read into it. They will interpret it. So we just should be thoughtful. You all should be thoughtful. Leadership and management should be thoughtful about, how do you position it? What does it say? How do you want people to interpret this?
And having said that, it's a tremendous opportunity for it to be positive, to be forward-looking, to be an exciting time at JMU as we're gathering the data and information. It should just be wrapped in all kinds of warm fuzzies.
Absolutely.
And positivity.
And we
all
want to
right.
be transparent and we want people's opinion and all of that, but just be thoughtful about it.
Yeah.
And
Here's the
my last comment would be, and we've beaten this dead horse too, is as you're tweaking the questions and finalizing them all, the difference between the SWOT analysis and the employee engagement. Both are vital, both are important, and you need all of it, but just make sure you get what you want.
Thanks.
with that, I think that's a good place for us to end, to be cognizant of how this is going to be received in a very positive way, and then to be targeted and surgical and strategic about differentiating between the SWOT analysis and employee engagement type questionnaire. With that, Chris, I know you got an earful. David, I'm always able to answer, and I'd like to adjourn this meeting of the governance committee. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. I saw Kay's hand. All those in favor? Okay.
And most especially Charlie.
Yep.
Didn't mean
Charlie,
to
it's
call you
always-
out on the camera, Charlie.
That's fine. I thought we were doing this to help the new president and you guys do a new strategic plan. Is that not the main reason for doing this?
That's exactly right.
That is the main reason.
Okay,
And all the questions and comments were geared toward both of those.
okay. Well, I will make sure we communicate that with when we send it out. I think the purpose of it.
Yep.
Okay.
All right. We are adjourned. I apologize for keeping everybody over, but I think that was very productive.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Jack.
Thank
All
you.
right, yeah.